Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for listening. We've got a lot to get to on the podcast today, including a new SMU commit. But first, we jump in to the latest Pac-12 realignment rumor mill as SMU continues to sit in a good spot for Pac-12 expansion. And Washington State's president going on record saying that he expects a deal done really by the end of June. What's that mean for SMU? Well, the Mustangs haven't applied, or I should say, haven't let the American Athletic Conference know that they are leaving, like it's been reported San Diego State has done with their conference. But that doesn't mean SMU isn't in position to do all of those things. And like we've talked about on the podcast before, money is not going to be an issue when it comes to SMU and Pac-12 expansion and when they need to foot the bill for the time that they depart, whether that's leaving the league early overall in terms of getting into it for the 2024 season, or whether that's more money after the July 1st kind of deadline of sorts that's been talked about with San Diego State and SMU kind of needing to inform their conferences that they are leaving. And here's the thing with SMU. We have not seen any sort of leaks out of this university going through this. George Kliavkoff, the Pac-12 commissioner, did visit the campus, obviously for that SMU basketball game that was widely reported. Some people have said SMU leaked it. I'm of the camp that this is not the case. And however that got out ahead of time, obviously didn't change George Kliavkoff's plans to visit the campus. And I feel like SMU, the way they've handled realignment overall, they've been quiet. They've not even really said, hey, we're actively trying to do this. You know what? We're trying to get out of the American. They've been very respectful of the league as this has been going on. So when you look at the leak, I don't think it came from SMU side of things. Heck, I didn't even get it from an SMU source. So when it comes to the Pac-12 and maybe these final decisions starting to get actually made with the TV rights deal and with expansion, SMU continuing to sit in a good spot. That they're not going to base a decision off of whether they think or not that SMU was the one that leaked, even if they are convinced or if they learned that SMU was in fact the leak for George Kliavkoff's visit. When it comes to what's next, now once again, a Pac-12 leader has set a timeline of when this all could be buttoned up. Now, my sources continue to tell me that, look, we're looking at summer as far as when this is going to be all ironed out. But the big question is will the Pac-12 have it ironed out in time for, let's just call it a clean break of sorts for both schools? We saw when San Diego State informed their conference that they're leaving, they asked for an extension to the end of July. Now, is that a get out of jail free card in the sense that, well, if this all falls apart, we want to be able to go back to the league? Or is it a situation where, hey, we want our deadline moved. We're not out the door just yet, but we want this extra month because this is this critical juncture for both the university as well as the league and the Pac-12 just overall. Let's ask for this extension and see if that can be agreed to. We haven't heard too many updates on that since, and they have time. You know, we're sitting here recording this on June 19th, and there's still time for that decision to be made. I wasn't expecting the league to get back to San Diego State right away and say, you know what, yes or no, you can or can't have that extension. When it comes to SMU, I think they're playing their cards very closely here when it comes to how they're dealing with the AAC, because they, one, know they have the money to do what they need to when it comes to leaving the league and being able to, either pay to get out early in 2024 or do whatever they need to leave overall. When it comes to their actual departure, I think one thing SMU doesn't necessarily want, as far as leaks go, we go back to this, is they don't want the Pac-12 to see, all right, it's been broken. SMU did the same thing San Diego State did, which is ask and inform the league that they are leaving. That's counting your chickens before they hatch. SMU has time in that regard to make that decision as far as, do they just inform the league that they're leaving? They could do it all the way up until the deadline. There's a bunch of different options for them when it comes to that. So I'm not surprised that SMU wasn't among or wasn't with San Diego State as far as news breaking that they've informed their leagues that they're leaving. I think SMU is playing this the right way. I think they continue to be confident. I backed that up with sources confirming that to me. But we're sitting here once again in a waiting game. But there was a big development that San Diego State is informed the league that they're planning to exit, which is a good sign for them. But you look at the reporting around conference realignment and expansion for the Pac-12, and now you're seeing that SMU buzz start to pick up again. That SMU is, in fact, in the plans for the TV deal. They are, in fact, in the plans for expansion. So it's kind of looking like what we've been saying all along. The SMU side of things, from what I hear, they're confident that they're going to be included when expansion comes. It's just yet another moment in this whole saga as to whether or not we're going to see this get pushed across the finish line. So did want to talk a little Pac-12 realignment to kick things off. Now we get to SMU's news out of its official visit weekend. And the big news to start was that SMU did land a commitment from the weekend. Graham Uter, we talked about him on the podcast before the official visit weekend. The Daphne, Alabama native did commit to the Mustangs, and he is their first offensive line commit in the 2024 recruiting class. He's at a Bayside Academy. He played a little bit of defensive line, but has now been firmly on the offensive side of things, and that's where Garen Justice and SMU is recruiting him at. And I like him as a developmental prospect. And so often when it comes to high school recruiting on the offensive line, you look at prospects, especially the way SMU is addressed with the transfer portal and some of the vets they still have on the roster, as guys that are going to redshirt, are going to sit back and develop and get that coaching from Garen Justice, get in the weight room, especially in Graham Utter's case, and add mass and add just strength overall for the college level. Now Graham is committed to SMU. He had offers from Troy, UAB, and others. He did camp at LSU just last week before going on his official visit to SMU. I came away impressed. That's the second time that I've seen Graham this year. He was also at the Under Armour Dallas camp, where he was one of the guys that really kind of stood out in that regard, just from his ability to move around and be somebody that you look at overall as a player that if you're SMU, you take as a developmental guy because he's got that athleticism on the offensive line that schools do covet, which I think is really important when you look at offensive line recruiting. You know, there are guys that can come in and play right away. There are guys that will develop and sit back a little bit and not be somebody you expect much from until they get older in their college careers. And I feel like Graham is right in that mold, and that's okay. And I think that's a testament too to what Garen Justice has done, revamping this entire offensive line group, from the transfers they brought in, both in the spring and the summer, to what they're doing in the high school ranks with the guys they brought in the 2023 class. I think with Graham Uter, you got a guy who very much wants to be at SMU. He's got some SMU ties. I believe it's his grandfather that actually attended SMU. And now you can bring him in and say, you don't have to play right away. Those days are not there for SMU when it comes to freshman offensive linemen. But he's got to get stronger. You see right there in the video, if you're watching on YouTube, he's got the quickness side to side to stay in front of guys. Now you want to see him, as he continues to develop that strength, be able to anchor a little bit better. And like I mentioned, he's still a little raw when it comes to the position because he has been playing both ways at Bayside Academy. So SMU on the board in their their second official visit weekend of the summer, and one that really was a little bit bigger than the first one. They were able to bring in some guys, including quarterback commit Tyler Aronson, who did some recruiting. I caught up with Tyler before I recorded this podcast, and he just said it was a great opportunity to continue to get around the program, get around Rhett Lashley and his staff, and see what they're continuing to build. They got a look at the end zone complex, which is fully underway now. It was a little bit more so in its infancy when Tyler was here in the spring, but they took some construction picks. They were able to recruit Graham Uter, but Tyler also was recruiting another prospect on the offensive line, and a guy that kind of quietly set that SMU official visit, and that is a member of the all-name team, without a doubt, in the 2024 recruiting class. But King Large is a guy that you've got to have squarely on your radar now if you're an SMU fan, as far as watching him as a guy who could end up in SMU's class, and it could happen sooner rather than later. It wouldn't shock me at all if he's somebody that makes a decision this week. He's got an official visit to Colorado State, I believe, lined up coming up this weekend. But will he take that visit? That's what we'll be watching. He's a big offensive lineman. He projects along the interior. He's listed at 6'4", 295, but he's around 6'3". He is a mean, nasty player who camped at SMU. He picked up an offer during the spring, and then he came back this weekend for that official visit. And I feel like SMU did a really nice job recruiting him. And I think we've talked about it on the podcast before, but the job Garen Justice is doing recruiting, I think, is really starting to stand out. Both from the evaluation standpoint, you look at a guy like Sean Scott last cycle, who ended up picking up some Power 5 attention, including a Cal offer late. And King Large also has some Power 5 programs that have offered him. And he's had a mix of prospects that were maybe a little under-recruited and look like guys that they're going to be able to rely on down the line. And also some players that have been on the radar for a long time. And that's who King Large is. I mean, one with a name like that, how can colleges not pay attention to him? But also, he plays for one of the best high school programs in the country at St. John Bosco. You see he sits there as a top 50 interior offensive lineman for us at On3, 87 grade on the industry ranking. We're really high on him for being a guy, coming out of a program like that. We've had a lot of opportunities to see him, and he was a top performer at the Under Armour Los Angeles Regional. And SMU gets access to that type of tape too through underclassmen report. So they made the move after the spring, or during the spring, I should say, offering him when Garen Justice went out there and saw him. And he was on campus this past weekend getting a look at SMU. I put in an On3 recruiting prediction machine pick for SMU to land him. And I did also drop my trend meter at ontheponyexpress.com. So if you haven't subscribed, check it out. You can also gift subscriptions now to ontheponyexpress.com to those SMU fans who aren't on the site yet. You can twist their arm a little bit and say, hey, I got you a 6-month membership for $40 or a year for $75. And you can see why I maybe know a little bit more about recruiting or the ins and outs of SMU football than you right now. So I encourage you guys to check that out. I posted the link on the site and we'll tweet it out as well. But it's on on3.com, I believe, it's on3.com, on3.com/teams/SMU-Mustangs/gift. So check that out and gift a subscription today. That's where you're going to see how this class is trending. Who are the prospects SMU is pushing for, especially. That's what the trend meter is all about. And I'm going to drop that again after this final official visit weekend of June, which will be another big one. SMU also hosted the #1 edge rusher in the country last week for an official visit. And I wanted to kind of circle back to Colin Simmons and, where things kind of stand going into that, going into the rest of the summer for him. He's got some more official visits left, but he is fresh off an Alabama visit. And one thing we picked up is that the Tide don't really seem like a big contender for him. which bodes well, at least for SMU's chances. And when you look at Colin Simmons and what he brings to the table, he's got the ability to get after the passer in an elite way. I think as far as the schools we're going to hear a lot about down the stretch, LSU, Texas, Texas A&M, because I think distance is a key factor for him with his family and just what he wants to do and have them be at his games and things like that. So Colin Simmons is at least on the radar for SMU fans. You know, you get him on campus for an official visit. He wanted to show his city some love, and he did just that by coming through SMU for that official visit. He'll also head to LSU and Texas A&M, as well as Texas for more visits. He's a prospect that is going to be highly recruited to the end, but I can say that SMU's NIL situation is in a good spot. And I'm not sitting here saying SMU is going to get Colin Simmons by any means, but let's just say it just won't be for lack of money and for lack of showing him the right amount of attention that way that SMU can do and certainly has done for prospects and transfers in the past. When it comes to SMU's official visit weekend, the Mustangs also hosted one of the top edge rushers in the country, in my opinion, at least. He's on the verge of being a top 50 prospect overall at his position on the On3 industry ranking, but we have him as the number 45 overall edge rusher in the country at his position, and that's Jalen Jones out of Beaumont Westbrook. And if you look at Jalen Jones, you see 6'5", 210. He's got a basketball background too. And I feel like, once again, SMU made a good push here with him. They're battling Purdue, but SMU's in need of an edge rusher in this class. He's a huge priority for the staff. And so we'll kind of see how the chips fall with Jalen Jones, but he was the other official visitor that was on campus this past weekend, and SMU was able to, put their best foot forward, and Calvin Thibodeau was able to share his plan with him. And look, we'll see. SMU is looking to overcome Purdue, which hosted him earlier this month for an official visit. SMU is going to be busy over the next week or so, I can tell you that. And one prospect I want to highlight for you guys, because he's going to take a midweek official visit from what he told me, and that's Jonathan Agamadu out of McKinney. We've talked about him before. He's got a little bit of an edge rusher to him, but he's more of an off-the-ball linebacker, I think, at the next level, and a true thumper in that sense. And SMU made his top 5 along with Memphis, Missouri, North Texas, and Oklahoma State, which hosted him last weekend for an official visit. I think with his July 4th decision date, you're seeing an SMU-Oklahoma State battle really emerge here for Jonathan Agamadu, who's really been on the rise this spring. You know, a relatively quiet prospect until coaches were able to get out to McKinney High and watch him move around this spring. And now you've got SMU leading the way on the On3 recruiting prediction machine. And I think if SMU wins out with Jonathan Agamadu, I think, one, distance is going to be a factor, but also they had him on campus a bunch this spring. They hosted him for practices. They hosted him unofficially. And I think that goes a long way with really setting the table well when it comes to some of these prospects that kind of pick up bigger offers or get some big official visits on the books as far as Power 5 programs go. A lot of the guys that are coming in this weekend are highly sought after. I mean, this upcoming weekend, we'll do a preview podcast later this week on it, will really kind of make or break how SMU's recruiting class looks come, let's say, end of July, as these guys start reeling off decisions, because this is the time where you get that final push and you can really make the most of it. Or a prospect could say, you know what, I'm going to go elsewhere. And SMU's official visit weekend this past weekend really stood out to me as far as the early returns on it that we got. And this coming weekend, they're going to host almost double-digit prospects. So be sure to be on theponyexpress.com for that. We'll be covering it wall to wall with reactions. We had intel dropping throughout the weekend. So it's a good time to be on the site for that. But I think what's next for this class is to get that star power. And we're seeing some top targets really kind of trend SMU's way, but not only are they top targets, but they're also some of the best players in Texas. And one of them is Dodson Walker, the safety out of Duncanville, the 4-star prospect who SMU has been all over. And he's one of the prospects that's going to hit campus this weekend. He arrives, I think, on Thursday for that official visit. So they'll run that Thursday to Saturday. And then, SMU is going to push to get him to shut it down. You see SMU has overtaken LSU and Texas and Oklahoma State as the on-3 recruiting prediction machine leader. So circle him. He's one of the top safeties in the country. SMU just hosted Dax Collins out of Oklahoma for an official visit, but it looks like they're starting to push their chips all in on a guy like Dodson Walker. So again, we'll get into the big official visit weekend later this week, but SMU is really trending well for some of these guys in the 2024 recruiting class, and this upcoming weekend could be, in fact, the biggest yet this summer. That's kind of it. It's a little shorter edition of the podcast today, but did kind of want to run you guys through that. We've got a lot going on this week. We're going to try to get into SMU football workouts, basketball workouts. We're also going to start our previews of some of the opponents on SMU's team. We'll hear about Louisiana Tech later this week as well. So be sure to check back for that jam-packed edition of the podcast on Thursday to hear about the Bulldogs. I actually caught up with Sonny Cumbie, the new coach of Louisiana Tech at LSU camp. He was down there, and he's excited about what's going on in Ruston. At least they're putting together some good stuff as far as recruiting goes in Louisiana and Texas. So kind of another school to watch when it comes to some of these prospects that SMU does battle for from time to time. But it'll be interesting to see how they pan out this fall after a tough 2022 campaign in Ruston. So they were, and I said he was a new head coach, but that I don't think that's right. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think they went through their first. He went through his first season this past year at Louisiana Tech. So my apologies there. But it was a rough one as they kind of start to change the culture and get their own players in there. So we'll hear about more of the Bulldogs later this week on the podcast. So we're excited about that. The previews of SMU's opponents starting to ramp up this summer. Another thing that's ramping up, our members only portion of the YouTube channel. We dropped our first podcast last week. What an awesome response we got from our members in the community. So check that out. They're in-depth, hour-plus long editions of the podcast. Each Wednesday is what I'm aiming for during the month. You get 4 of them a month. We'll try to expand from there, but we've got some big things planned for that as well as that starts to expand. We had about 40 people jump on board without even seeing a podcast. So $3 a month. You can check it out on our community tab. And join there and check it out. So I'm excited about everything going on at ontheponyexpress.com. We're going to be busy. I have a feeling SMU is going to get on a run here of commitments. I just want to check, make sure none had rolled in before I wrap up this edition of the podcast. So hope you guys enjoyed it. I know it was short, but wanted to get you guys something to kick off your Monday. And we will have plenty more to come later this week on the On the Pony Express podcast. Thanks for listening, everyone.